Did you know that planting your vegetables just 1 week too early can actually cut your entire summer harvest in half? It sounds crazy, but it is true. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about exactly what you absolutely must plant in May to guarantee a jungle of fresh food in your backyard. We are diving deep into the gardener calendar for 2026, focusing specifically on everyone's favorites, tomatoes and cucumbers. I promise that by the end of this video, you will discover a completely unexpected trick for planting your tomatoes that goes against everything your grandparents taught you. Most people think that the second the calendar flips to May, it is a race to shove every single seed into the dirt. But what if I told you that being a little lazy right now is actually the secret to outgrowing all your neighbors? Are you the type of gardener who rushes to plant, or do you wait patiently? Let me know in the comments right now, and let us see who gets the bigger harvest. Before we dig our hands into the dirt, we need to understand why this specific month is so incredibly important. For hundreds of years, farmers and backyard growers have relied on a gardener's calendar to predict the chaotic shifts in spring weather. May is historically known as the pivot point of the entire growing season. It is that magical window where the soil finally wakes up from its winter freeze, but the threat of a random, devastating frost is still lurking in the shadows. Understanding this delicate balance is what separates a beginner from a master grower. The concept of the last frost date is your ultimate guide here. It is an invisible line drawn by nature, dictating exactly when tender plants like tomatoes and cucumbers can safely move outdoors without freezing to death. We are not just throwing seeds in the ground today. We are playing a strategic game with Mother Nature, setting up a foundation that will support massive, heavy vines by the middle of July. Let us start by looking right under our feet at the actual temperature of your soil. One of the biggest mistakes you can make right now is looking at the thermometer on your porch and thinking your garden is ready. There is a huge myth out there that if the air feels warm when you are wearing a t-shirt, the ground is completely ready for seeds. That is entirely false. Cold, damp earth will literally rot your expensive seeds before they even have a chance to wake up. Here is a vivid example for you to picture in your mind. Imagine taking a nice hot shower, but then stepping out onto a freezing cold tile floor. That horrible shock is exactly what a warm, cozy tomato seedling feels when it is shoved into chilly spring dirt. Instead of guessing, you need to treat your garden like you are baking a cake. You want that soil to feel consistently warm to the touch, ideally around 65 degrees Fahrenheit. If you do not have a fancy soil thermometer, just use your bare hand. Dig down about 3 or 4 inches into the bed. If the dirt feels uncomfortably cold against your bare skin, your tomatoes will hate it too. Wait a few more days. The sun in May is incredibly powerful, and it will bake that top layer of earth perfectly if you just give it a little time. Patience right now equals a massive harvest later. Now, we absolutely must talk about choosing the right tomato varieties for your 2026 garden. It is so easy to get overwhelmed at the garden center when you see hundreds of little green plants. There is a common myth that a tomato is just a tomato, and any plant will give you the same result. The truth is, choosing the wrong variety for your specific space is a guaranteed recipe for failure. Think of it like buying a pair of shoes. You would not wear heavy winter boots to run a marathon. For example, if you are growing in small pots on an apartment balcony, planting a massive indeterminate beefsteak tomato is a terrible idea. It will grow 8 feet tall, fall over, and give you almost no fruit. Instead, you want to look for words like bush or determinate on the plant tag. These act like well-behaved bushes that stop growing at a certain height and produce all their fruit at once. On the other hand, if you have a massive backyard trellis, you want those wild, vining, indeterminate types that will give you fresh tomatoes every single week until the snow falls. Always match the personality of the plant to the reality of your garden space before you ever pull out your trowel. This brings us to the actual physical act of putting a tomato plant into the ground. Prepare to have your mind completely blown by the trench planting method. Almost everyone believes the myth that you should dig a hole just deep enough to cover the existing root ball, exactly how it looks in the little plastic pot. If you do this, you are missing out on the tomato plant's hidden superpower. Tomato stems are covered in tiny little white hairs. If those hairs touch dirt, they instantly transform into strong, deep roots. Picture a tall, wobbly tomato plant sitting in front of you. Instead of digging a deep, vertical hole, I want you to dig a long, shallow trench. Pluck off all the bottom leaves of your plant and lay the entire stem sideways in the dirt, leaving only the top cluster of leaves poking out of the ground. It looks completely ridiculous at first, like the plant has fallen over. But within 48 hours, that top leafy part will reach for the sun and stand straight up. Meanwhile, the entire buried stem will explode with a massive underground root system. A bigger root system means the plant can drink more water, absorb more nutrients, and survive intense summer heat waves without wilting. Let us shift our focus over to your cucumbers, because they require a completely different strategy in May. There is a very stubborn myth floating around that you must start cucumber seeds indoors in little plastic cups way back in March or April. The truth is, cucumbers absolutely despise having their roots disturbed. If you try to transplant them, they often go into a state of shock, turn yellow, and refuse to grow for weeks. The best way to handle cucumbers in May is direct sowing right into your garden beds. Picture yourself making a small, flat mountain of dirt, about the size of a dinner plate. We call this a mound. Push 3 or 4 cucumber seeds right into the top of this mound, about 1 inch deep. The raised soil in the mound actually warms up much faster under the May sun than the flat ground around it. This extra heat tells the seeds to sprout incredibly fast. By planting them directly where they will live all summer, they shoot their taproots straight down without any interruption. They will easily catch up to and usually outgrow the sad little transplants you buy at the big box stores. Direct sowing is cheaper, easier, and gives you vastly healthier cucumber vines. We cannot talk about planting in May without discussing the magic of companion planting. You should never force your tomatoes to grow completely alone in a sea of bare dirt. The myth of the perfectly clean, weed-free, single-crop farm is actually terrible for backyard soil health. Plants are highly social creatures, and they thrive when they have the right friends living next door. Imagine building a natural fortress around your precious tomato plants. The absolute best friend a tomato can have is basil. When you plant fragrant basil directly at the base of your tomatoes, something incredible happens. The strong, spicy oils in the basil leaves actually confuse and repel nasty insects that want to eat your tomato leaves. Plus, many expert gardeners swear that basil actually makes the tomatoes taste sweeter when they are harvested. Another amazing companion is the marigold flower. Picture a bright, glowing ring of orange and yellow flowers bordering your vegetable patch. Marigolds release a special chemical from their roots that kills harmful microscopic worms in the soil. By mixing your vegetables with herbs and flowers in May, you are creating a self-defending, highly productive jungle. If you are planting cucumbers this month, you absolutely need to build a vertical support system on the exact same day you put the seeds in the ground. Do not wait until June to think about this. The biggest myth about growing cucumbers is that they are perfectly happy crawling around on the wet dirt. Allowing your vines to sprawl on the ground is basically an open invitation for slugs, beetles, and devastating fungal diseases to destroy your entire crop. Think of a wet sponge sitting on a dirty floor. That is what a cucumber leaf looks like when it rains. Instead, you need to train them to climb upward. Imagine building a simple A-frame structure out of bamboo poles, or leaning an old piece of cattle fencing against a strong wooden post. When cucumbers grow vertically up a trellis, the wind can blow right through the leaves, drying them off quickly after a spring rainstorm. Dry leaves mean no powdery mildew. Furthermore, gravity pulls the heavy cucumbers straight down as they grow, resulting in perfectly straight, beautiful fruits that are incredibly easy to see and pick. Get your trellis up right now in May, before the plants even start running. Watering your new plants in May is a delicate art form that most people get completely wrong. The common myth is that you should stand outside with a hose and lightly spray the leaves of your garden for 5 minutes every single evening. This is actually doing terrible damage. Shallow, frequent watering trains the plant's roots to stay right at the surface of the dirt, desperately waiting for your daily sprinkle. When the brutal heat of July arrives, those shallow roots will dry out in hours, and your plant will die. The correct method for May is deep, infrequent watering. Imagine placing a slow dripping hose at the base of your tomato plant and letting it run for 30 minutes, soaking the soil completely. You want the water to travel deep down into the earth, forcing the roots to chase it downward. After a deep soak, you might not need to water again for 3 or 4 days, depending on your weather. Always water exactly at the soil level, never on the leaves. Wet leaves sitting in the cool May night air are a breeding ground for terrible blights and diseases. Train your roots to go deep now, and they will reward you all summer long. The absolute best thing you can do for your soil in May, right after planting and watering, is adding a thick layer of mulch. There is a weird myth that perfectly bare black dirt looks nice and is therefore healthy for a garden. In reality, bare dirt is damaged dirt. Nature hates a vacuum, and if you do not cover the soil, nature will cover it for you with hundreds of aggressive weeds. Picture taking a thick, cozy winter blanket and tucking it gently around the stems of your baby tomato and cucumber plants. You can use clean straw, shredded dry leaves, or even untreated grass clippings. A 3-inch layer of this natural mulch acts like a magical shield. It blocks the blazing sun from instantly evaporating the water you just poured onto the soil. It also regulates the temperature, keeping the earth cool on hot days and warm on chilly May nights. Most importantly, as that straw or leaf layer slowly breaks down over the summer, it turns into rich compost, feeding worms and beneficial bacteria right at the root zone. Mulching in May will literally save you dozens of hours of miserable weeding in July. While everyone is completely obsessed with tomatoes and cucumbers, May is also the absolute perfect time to sow your root vegetables. Many beginners believe the myth that radishes, carrots, and beets can only be planted in the freezing cold of early April. While they do love cool weather, planting a fresh batch in May ensures a steady harvest well into the summer. Sowing carrots requires a very specific trick. Carrot seeds are ridiculously tiny, almost like specks of dust. The mistake people make is burying them too deep under heavy, clumpy mud. Picture preparing a patch of soil until it feels as soft and loose as sand on a beach. You want to sprinkle those tiny seeds right on the very surface, and then just barely dust them with a microscopic layer of fine compost. The challenge in May is keeping those shallow seeds consistently moist so they can germinate. If the top of the dirt dries out for even a few hours, the tiny carrot sprouts will die. A brilliant trick is to lay a wooden board directly over the seeded area for about 5 days to trap the moisture. Just remember to check under the board every single morning and remove it the second you see little green specks. We must seriously discuss the terrifying threat of late May frosts. In many parts of the world, there is a legendary weather phenomenon known as the ice saints, which usually hits right around the middle of May. The myth is that once the calendar hits May 1st, you are completely safe from freezing weather. Mother Nature loves to prove this wrong by sending one last brutal blast of Arctic air just when your garden is starting to look beautiful. You have to be prepared to defend your plants at a moment's notice. Imagine walking out into your yard at sunset, holding a giant stack of old bed sheets and cardboard boxes. If the weather forecast predicts the temperature dropping below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, you need to physically cover your tender tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. Drape the fabric gently over the plants, making sure the edges touch the ground to trap the heat radiating up from the soil. Never use thin plastic bags for this, because plastic transfers the freezing cold directly onto the leaves and will burn them. You must treat your spring garden like a fragile newborn baby until the month of June officially arrives. Let us talk about feeding your hungry plants, because fertilizer in May sets the stage for everything that follows. The worst myth in gardening is that pouring massive amounts of bright blue liquid chemical fertilizer on tiny seedlings will force them to grow huge instantly. That is like forcing a toddler to drink 6 cups of strong coffee. It will burn their delicate roots and cause wild, weak, floppy green growth with absolutely no fruit later on. When you plant your tomatoes and cucumbers in May, you want to focus on slow, gentle, organic food. Picture grabbing a large handful of dark, rich, crumbly compost and tossing it right into the planting hole before the plant goes in. We call this black gold. You can also add a small scoop of crushed eggshells for calcium, which prevents your tomatoes from getting black, rotten bottoms later in the season. A little bit of organic bone meal mixed into the dirt will encourage explosive root growth without shocking the plant. Feed the soil first. Build a healthy underground ecosystem, and the soil will naturally feed your plants at the exact speed they require. Pruning is a task you must start thinking about in late May, specifically for your indeterminate tomato plants. There is a myth that you should just let a tomato plant grow completely wild and crazy, because more branches must mean more tomatoes. This is entirely false. If you let an indeterminate tomato grow without discipline, it will turn into a massive, tangled bush of green leaves that blocks the sun and traps moisture, leading directly to terrible fungus problems. Your goal in May is to train the plant to grow up a single, strong main vine. Picture yourself carefully inspecting the stem of your tomato plant. In the little V-shaped armpit where a side branch meets the main stem, you will see a tiny new leaf sprouting. This is called a sucker. If you leave it alone, it will turn into a massive new branch. In May, while the plant is still small, you want to gently snap those little suckers off with your fingers. By removing these early suckers, you force the plant to push all of its powerful energy into growing tall and producing giant, juicy clusters of fruit, instead of wasting energy on useless green leaves. Here is a brilliant companion planting secret that you should start implementing in late May to supercharge your garden. You should be planting bush beans directly alongside your heavy feeding plants like tomatoes and cucumbers. The myth is that beans only exist to give you a harvest of green pods. While fresh beans are delicious, their real value is what they are secretly doing underground. Beans are part of a magical family of plants known as legumes. Imagine these bean roots acting as microscopic fertilizer factories. They actually pull pure nitrogen gas straight out of the air and convert it into little white nodules of solid fertilizer directly on their roots. Nitrogen is the exact chemical that tomatoes and cucumbers desperately need to grow large, healthy green leaves. By planting low-growing bush beans around your taller crops, you are essentially providing a slow-release, completely free, natural fertilizer system. Plus, the broad leaves of the bean plants act as a living mulch, shading the soil and keeping the roots of your tomatoes nice and cool during the hot afternoons. Early pest control in May is absolutely crucial, but you need to approach it the right way. As soon as the soft, sweet green leaves of your new plants emerge, armies of tiny pests like aphids will arrive to feast. The myth is that the moment you see a single bug, you need to run to the store and buy a massive bottle of toxic chemical poison to spray everywhere. That is the worst thing you can do. Broad-spectrum poisons kill the good bugs right along with the bad ones, destroying the balance of your garden. Instead, start with the most gentle method possible. Picture holding your garden hose with a spray nozzle attached. You can actually blast colonies of aphids right off your cucumber leaves with nothing but a sharp, strong stream of pure water. They are soft-bodied insects, and the water pressure destroys them instantly without harming the plant. If they come back, try a simple mix of water and a few drops of mild dish soap. You can also order live ladybugs online and release them into your garden at twilight. A single ladybug is like a hungry little tiger that will devour hundreds of aphids every single day. Let nature do the fighting for you. One of the most overlooked tasks in May is completing a detailed sun map of your growing area. There is a common myth among beginners that if one corner of the yard gets sun, the entire backyard must be perfectly fine for growing a vegetable garden. This mistake leads to pale, leggy plants that refuse to produce flowers. Tomatoes and cucumbers are absolute sun worshippers. They demand a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of direct, brutal sunlight every single day. Picture yourself walking out into your yard on a clear Saturday in May with a piece of paper and a pencil. You need to check the shadows cast by your house, your fences, and your neighbor's trees at 9 in the morning, 12 at noon, and 4 in the afternoon. The angle of the sun in May is very different than it was in December. A spot that looked perfectly sunny 2 months ago might suddenly be hidden under the shadow of an oak tree that just grew all of its leaves back. Only plant your heat-loving summer crops in the zones that pass your rigorous May sun test. If a spot is too shady, save it for leafy greens like lettuce and spinach. Let us not forget about summer squash and zucchini, which are absolute staples that need to go into the ground in late May. A devastating myth about zucchini is that you can cram 3 or 4 plants right next to each other in a tiny raised bed to save space. People completely underestimate how massive these monsters will become. Within 6 weeks, a single healthy zucchini plant will look like a prehistoric beast in your garden. Picture giant prickly green leaves the size of elephant ears expanding 3 feet in every direction. If you plant them too close together, they will completely choke each other out. The airflow will stop, the leaves will remain soaking wet from the morning dew, and a white fungal disease called powdery mildew will destroy everything in a matter of days. In May, you must respect the spacing requirements. Give every single zucchini seed at least 3 square feet of dedicated real estate. It will look like a ridiculous amount of empty dirt right now, but trust me, by the middle of July, you will be fighting your way through a jungle just to find the vegetables. If you started any seeds indoors under artificial grow lights this spring, May is the month of the Great Transition. The absolute deadliest myth is that you can take a tomato plant that has lived its entire life in your cozy, warm living room and plant it directly into the harsh outdoor dirt on a sunny day. If you do this, your plant will literally suffer severe sunburn, turn completely white, and die within 24 hours. Indoor plants have 0 defenses against real wind and the intense ultraviolet rays of the actual sun. You have to put them through a plant boot camp, a process called hardening off. Imagine taking your little green babies out to a shady, protected spot on your porch for just 1 hour on the first day. Then immediately bring them back inside. The next day, give them 2 hours of weak morning sun. You must slowly expose them to the harsh realities of the outdoors over a period of 7 to 10 days. They will naturally build up thicker cell walls and a waxy coating on their leaves. Only after they graduate from this boot camp are they truly ready to be planted in your May garden. May is also the time to embrace the brilliant strategy of succession planting. The classic gardening myth is that planting day is just one single weekend in May where you exhaust yourself putting every single seed you own into the ground all at once. The huge problem with this approach is that all your crops will ripen on the exact same day in August. You will have more radishes and lettuce than you can possibly eat, and then 2 weeks later, you will have nothing left. Succession planting completely solves this. Picture yourself holding a packet of bush bean seeds. Instead of planting the entire row today, you only plant 1/3 of the row. Then, you write a note on your calendar, and 2 weeks later, you go back out and plant the second third. 2 weeks after that, you plant the final section. By staggering your planting dates throughout May and into June, you are creating a continuous, rolling harvest. As soon as one plant finishes producing, the next one right beside it is perfectly ready to be picked. You work a little bit smarter now to enjoy fresh food consistently all summer long. We need to talk about soil chemistry in May, specifically regarding a heartbreaking problem that ruins tomatoes, called blossom end rot. The prevailing myth is that if your tomatoes develop a disgusting, flat, black, rotting spot on the bottom, it means a bug has eaten them or they have a disease. In reality, blossom end rot is not a disease at all. It is a physical reaction to a lack of calcium in the plant, completely triggered by uneven watering and bad soil pH. May is the time to correct this before the flowers even appear. Imagine the root system of your tomato trying to suck up tiny minerals from the dirt. If the soil is completely dried out, the roots physically cannot absorb calcium. When you plant in May, ensure your soil is rich in organic matter to hold water like a sponge. As I mentioned earlier, crushing dried eggshells into a fine powder and mixing it into the planting hole gives a slow release of calcium. But more importantly, setting up a strict, consistent watering schedule in May prevents the wild swings between swampy mud and desert dry dirt. Consistency is the ultimate cure for blossom end rot. Finally, the most powerful tool you can start using this May is not a shovel or a fancy fertilizer. It is a simple notebook. The greatest myth in backyard gardening is the belief that you will somehow remember exactly what you did this year when next spring rolls around. You will completely forget. You will forget which variety of cucumber tasted the best. You will forget the exact week you planted your tomatoes. And you will forget where the aphids attacked the worst. Picture a muddy, water-stained notebook sitting on your potting bench. In May, I want you to draw a rough sketch of your garden beds. Write down the exact names of the seeds you planted, the date they went into the dirt, and what the weather was doing that week. Make notes about which plants look strong and which ones look miserable. This journal becomes your personal garden Bible. When May of 2027 arrives, you will not be guessing anymore. You will simply look back at your notes, repeat the things that worked perfectly, and avoid the mistakes that cost you time and money. Observation is the true secret of a master gardener. And there you have it, the ultimate secrets to dominating the month of May in your 2026 garden. The real twist here is realizing that your garden is not just a collection of random plants, but a deeply connected, living system. Everything you do right now, from checking the exact temperature of the soil with your bare hands, to burying those tomato stems sideways, to bringing in the right companion flowers, is building an invisible foundation. If you master the patience required to wait out the final frost and dedicate yourself to deep watering and thick mulching, you will absolutely shock yourself with the sheer volume of food you produce this summer. May is your launch pad, so make every single day count. Thank you so much for hanging out with me in the garden today. If you learned something completely new, please smash that like button and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss our June update on pruning and pest control. Now, I have a question for you. What is the very first vegetable you are putting into the ground this May? Drop your answers in the comments below and let us get a great conversation started. Happy planting, and I will see you in the next video.